He said I was too old, not in a scream, not in an argument. It was quiet, almost casual, like he was stating the weather. Thais, you're 50. You don't start life at 50. You settle. And the way he said it, slow, condescending, with that half smirk he always used when he believed he was the smartest person in the room, lit a fire in my chest so deep I felt it burn behind my ribs. He genuinely thought I was done, that my dreams had expired, that my desires had aged out, that my future had a deadline, and that deadline had passed. And the worst part, he said it after choosing someone younger, someone full of energy, someone with more time ahead, someone he believed would make him feel 25 again. He looked at me the way people look at old photographs, nostalgic, familiar, but no longer useful. That night, when he walked out of our home with his suitcase and his arrogance, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, it did, deeply, but because something inside me clicked into place. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. For the first time in years, I finally heard my own voice beneath all the noise. If you think this is the end of me, you have no idea who I am, because here is what he never understood. A woman at 50 doesn't break the same way a woman at 20 does. She knows too much. She's lived too much. She has rebuilt herself before, and she knows she can do it again. But he didn't know that. He only saw his own fantasy of what aging meant, and he thought I would shrink to fit inside it. He was wrong, because the moment he left, the moment he placed another woman above me, the moment he decided my story was over, was the moment I realized my life was just beginning. He walked out thinking I would collapse, thinking I would crumble, thinking I would fade quietly into the background of his new, younger life. But instead, something else happened. I woke up. I woke up to the years I had sacrificed, to the dreams I had paused, to the parts of myself I had abandoned just to make him feel bigger. I stood in the middle of the living room, the silence heavy, the house empty, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, possibility. It scared me, it excited me, it reminded me of the woman I once was, the woman I thought I had lost. And that night, for the first time in months, I went to bed not with fear, but with a sense of beginning. He said I was too old to start over, but starting over was exactly what I was about to do. And he had no idea how far ahead I would go without him. Because he didn't just underestimate me, he miscalculated who I become when someone pushes me to my limit. This is the story of how a woman he dismissed at 50 became a woman he could no longer reach, emotionally, physically, or in life. Because the truth is simple. I was never too old. He was simply too small. Before he broke me, I trusted easily. Not because I was naive, but because I believed that commitment meant partnership, that what I gave would eventually be matched. Before everything fell apart, I was a woman who carried the weight of the relationship on my back and called it love. I adjusted, I compromised, I shrank myself again and again because I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping the relationship alive. I softened my voice, my needs, my edges, every time he needed space, validation, or attention. Not because he asked, but because I believed love required sacrifice. I was 50, but inside that relationship I felt smaller than my age, as if every year I grew older, I had to become quieter, easier, more convenient, just to make sure I wasn't too much for him. He made aging sound like a countdown, and I unknowingly lived like someone trying not to run out of time. I changed the way I dressed so he wouldn't compare me. I held back my opinions so he wouldn't argue. I carried the emotional labor so he wouldn't feel overwhelmed. And I became a woman who apologized for existing too loudly. I became a woman who believed loyalty would protect her. But loyalty never protects you from someone who thinks they deserve more than you. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a pedestal, and someone quiet enough not to shake it. And the saddest part, I didn't see it. Not at the beginning, not even in the middle. I only noticed when I looked back and realized how much of myself I had erased just to keep him comfortable. I stopped going to the gym because he said it was a waste of time at your age. I stopped taking classes because learning new things at 50 is pointless. I stopped meeting my friends because women your age should stay home more. Slowly, I stopped being Thais and became a version of myself that revolved around his moods. He made me feel like aging was a flaw, like every year added was a minus sign, like I was running out of relevance. And instead of challenging the narrative, I absorbed it. I convinced myself that wanting more was selfish, that having dreams at 50 was ridiculous, that expecting love, admiration, respect was asking for too much. I thought love was endurance. He thought love was ownership, and because I didn't see the difference, I stayed. For years I stayed, through his dismissive comments, through his slow withdrawal, through the way he stopped looking at me like a woman and started looking at me like a responsibility. I blamed myself for the distance, for the silences, for the growing emptiness between us. I kept trying to be gentler, smaller, easier, as if disappearing piece by piece would somehow bring him closer. But nothing I did changed him. It only changed me. And this is the truth women rarely admit out loud. Sometimes we lose ourselves long before someone else decides to leave. I didn't realize how far I had drifted from who I was until the day he told me I was too old to start over. That sentence didn't just hurt. It exposed everything I had abandoned just to make him feel young, powerful, in control. I thought I was protecting our relationship, but really, I was disappearing inside it, and that realization, that quiet, painful awareness, was the beginning of the woman I am now. Because before the fall, I was a woman who thought aging made me less. After the fall, I learned that surviving made me more. The first signs of betrayal never arrive loudly. They come disguised as small shifts, tiny cracks you almost convince yourself not to see. With him, it began with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, loaded kind that makes you feel like you're suddenly taking up too much space in a home you helped build. He used to talk to me about everything, his work, his plans, his frustrations. But then, little by little, those conversations dried up. He stopped asking about my day, stopped noticing when I changed my hair, stopped sitting next to me on the couch. He didn't pull away all at once. He drifted, 1 inch at a time. And I, like many women do, blamed myself. Maybe he's stressed, maybe it's a phase, maybe I should try harder. Again, then came the phone. He started placing it face down, turning off notifications, walking into other rooms to answer it. "It's just work," he said. But I knew the tone of a lie, even if I wasn't ready to admit it. His excuses were too quick, his explanations too prepared, his eyes too restless. And yet, I stayed quiet, because I didn't want to be the jealous older woman he liked to joke about when he wanted to make me feel insecure. So I swallowed my intuition and let the uneasiness settle inside my chest like dust. The changes kept coming. He became impatient with me, short-tempered, easily irritated by things that never bothered him before. If I asked a question, he sighed. If I made a comment, he rolled his eyes. If I disagreed, he shut down completely. He stopped touching me with affection and started touching me with obligation, as if my presence was a reminder of something he didn't want to face. And then came the comparison, subtle at first. You know, women these days take better care of themselves. People younger than us are doing amazing things with their lives. At your age, Thais, priorities should be different. Not once did he say it kindly. Every sentence landed like a bruise, and I realized something heartbreaking. He wasn't drifting because he was lost. He was drifting because he already knew where he wanted to go, and it wasn't toward me. I noticed the smell of a new cologne he had never worn before, the sudden gym membership, the new clothes, the way he styled his hair differently, the little spark in his eyes every time his phone lit up. He thought I didn't see, but women always see. We just hope we're wrong. One night, we were driving home, and his phone rang. He glanced at it, and for the first time, he didn't hide the smile that crossed his lips. Not a friendly smile, a smile of someone who feels chosen, someone who feels wanted, someone who feels alive, but not because of you. I felt my stomach drop. I felt the truth pressing against my ribs. I felt myself fading from his world one breath at a time. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I watched. The later arrivals, the excuses, the new habits, the sudden energy, the emotional distance. I watched the man who once held my face with tenderness now hold his phone like it was the center of his universe. I watched him transform, not into someone better, but into someone unrecognizable. The betrayal hadn't happened yet, not physically at least, but emotionally. He had already left. He was already somewhere else, with someone else, becoming someone else. And I was still there, trying to keep a home intact while he was quietly building a life outside of it. What hurt the most wasn't the possibility of cheating. It was realizing that he no longer feared losing me, that I had become an option, background noise, a placeholder. And deep down, I knew the fall was coming. I just didn't know how far it would go before I found the strength to rise. Humiliation doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like a drip, small, constant, predictable drops that eventually flood everything you once believed about yourself. For me, it started with laughter. Not the warm kind we used to share, not the playful kind lovers exchange. This was different. A dry, condescending laugh he used whenever he wanted to remind me that he was the one in control. It happened the day I mentioned taking a new course at work, a leadership training, something I had wanted for years. He didn't even look up from his phone. At 50? Really, Thais? What are you trying to prove? He laughed, like the idea of me evolving was a punchline. I felt something collapse inside me, but I swallowed the pain. That's what I did best back then. Bleed quietly. Another time we were getting ready for a dinner with friends. I tried on a new dress. Not flashy, not provocative, just beautiful. I walked into the room, hopeful for a moment of admiration. He glanced at me, tilted his head and smirked. It's fine, but maybe leave the tight dresses to younger women, okay? Younger women. Always younger women. He said it so casually, as if he was offering harmless advice instead of slicing through my confidence. And the worst part? I nodded, as if his insult was guidance. Another drop of humiliation. Then came the comments about my face. You worry too much. Your forehead shows everything. You should try those treatments. I heard they help older skin. Don't get upset, Thais. It makes your wrinkles worse. I wasn't allowed to age. I wasn't allowed to feel. I wasn't allowed to exist with the dignity I deserved. He treated me like a deteriorating version of myself while treating himself like a masterpiece still in progress. And every comparison was another step closer to the cliff I didn't know I was standing on. But the moment that broke something fundamental inside me came during a barbecue with friends. We were all talking about travel plans. I said I wanted to visit Italy someday. He laughed, loudly, in front of everyone. Italy? At our age? Come on, Thais. You can barely keep up on hikes. Don't start dreaming like you're 20. I felt the room spin. I felt the heat rise to my face. I felt the humiliation wash over me like boiling water. Everyone chuckled awkwardly, not sure whether to defend me or ignore it. And I did what women like me often do. I smiled. A tiny, broken smile to survive the moment. Inside, though, something snapped, not in anger, in awareness. And then came the ultimate humiliation, the kind that leaves a scar. He started showing up to events alone, started forgetting to invite me, started telling people we were going through a slow phase. Slow phase. Another word for disappearing me from his life. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone, a soft, flirtatious tone I hadn't heard from him in years. He said, "She's older. She doesn't really get it anymore." Older. Doesn't get it. Doesn't matter. That was when I realized he wasn't just underestimating me. He was rewriting who I was so he could justify leaving. He wanted to feel young again, and he wanted me to play the role of the outdated woman he had grown beyond. But here's the truth he couldn't see. I wasn't outdated. I was underappreciated. I wasn't too old. I was too strong for the version of himself he refused to outgrow. He thought humiliating me made him powerful. He thought belittling me kept him superior. He thought reminding me of my age would keep me afraid of starting over. But humiliation, when given to the wrong woman, doesn't break her. It awakens her. And with every careless laugh, every degrading comment, every comparison to someone younger, he wasn't weakening me. He was building the woman who would one day walk so far ahead of him that he would never catch up again. When he finally left, when the front door closed behind him with that cold, hollow sound, I didn't fall apart the way he expected. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the silence he once filled with criticism, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't strength, not yet. It was something simpler. Space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to exist without being constantly evaluated. For the first few days, I walked through the house like a ghost, touching objects that still carried his fingerprints, feeling memories press against my ribs like bruises. The bed felt too big, the kitchen too quiet, the mornings too long. And yet, there was a strange peace in the emptiness. I woke up without fear of judgment. I cooked without hearing complaints. I took a shower without rushing. I sat in silence without feeling the need to fill it. Grief came in waves, but between the waves something new began to appear. Myself. I didn't recognize her at first. She was raw, shaky, uncertain, but she was there. One morning I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, I looked into my own eyes without searching for his approval in them. And I whispered, almost surprised at the sound of my own voice, "You're still here." I cleaned the house, not to erase him, but to make room for a version of me I had abandoned. I opened windows, I moved furniture, I threw away clothes that made me feel small. I made coffee the way I liked it, stronger, hotter, without the guilt. And slowly, quietly, my life began stitching itself back together. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't inspiring, it wasn't some magical reinvention. It was survival. The kind of survival only a woman who has lived through emotional erosion understands. Halfway through this chapter, when the pain had softened enough for clarity to enter, I realized something important. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to Stories We Tell. Your support helps us keep creating stories about dignity, strength, and rebirth. Then life started happening again. Not the old life, the one I lived in reaction to him, but a new one that moved at my pace. I started walking every morning. At first, just around the block, head down, steps slow, as if my body still expected permission to take up space. But soon, my walks turned into longer routes. Different streets, different scenery, different thoughts. I began sleeping better, eating better, breathing better. I reconnected with an old friend I had lost touch with because he didn't like her. We sat in a cafe, sunlight pouring through the windows, and she said something that broke me open. "Thais, you look lighter, lighter. Not younger, not prettier, not different, just lighter." A word I hadn't felt in years. I went to the bookstore alone one Saturday, picked up a novel I'd always wanted to read, and for the first time in a long time, I lost myself in pages instead of problems. I decluttered the house. I opened my blinds. I started cooking meals I hadn't cooked in years because he preferred simpler food. Every small choice felt like reclaiming a stolen piece of myself. But the real turning point came one evening when I stepped outside to watch the sunset. The sky was painted in gold and rose, and for a moment, everything felt still. I realized I wasn't waiting for him to return. I wasn't hoping he would regret anything. I wasn't holding my breath for closure. I was simply living. He thought leaving me at 50 would break me. He thought I would spend the rest of my life mourning what he took. But life after the fall didn't destroy me. It revealed me. It brought me back to myself, and the woman who emerged from that quiet reconstruction was someone he would never recognize and never keep up with. The decision didn't come in a single moment. It wasn't a dramatic revelation or a sudden burst of courage or one of those movie scenes where the woman looks in the mirror and instantly chooses herself. My decision was quieter, slower, almost imperceptible, even to me. It began with observation. After the breakup, he tried to linger around my life in small, subtle ways. A message here, a forgotten box of belongings there, a casual text asking if I was doing okay. Not out of love, not out of concern, but out of fear of losing the control he once had. I didn't respond with anger. I didn't confront him. I didn't plead, demand, or explain. I observed. I watched the patterns that once trapped me from a distance safe enough to finally see them clearly. His manipulation disguised as affection, his self-pity disguised as vulnerability, his arrogance disguised as concern. From afar, it all looked so small. And with each passing day, my silence became intentional. I didn't block him. I didn't curse him. I didn't slam doors or throw accusations. I simply stopped feeding the version of me he was familiar with. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped apologizing for things I didn't do. I stopped shrinking to make conversations easier. Silence became my boundary. Silence became my strength. Silence became my way out. I realized that I didn't need to announce my departure. I just needed to stop returning to the places where I no longer belonged. One afternoon, he tried to call me. Not a quick call, a long, insistent one. Ringing again and again, as if persistence could drag me back into the life I had already stepped out of. I stared at the screen, felt the old instinct rise, the instinct to answer, to soothe, to resolve. But my hands stayed still, and for the first time, I let the phone ring and ring and ring until the silence swallowed it. That was the first real choice. A small choice, but it unlocked all the others. I stopped checking his social media, stopped rereading old messages, stopped waiting for apologies I knew would never come. Instead, I turned my attention inward. What did I want? Where did I want to go? Who was I becoming without his shadow over my light? These questions scared me, but they freed me too. The silent decision wasn't about leaving him. It was about leaving the version of myself who tolerated him. One morning, I woke up and realized something startling. I hadn't thought about him in days. Not his routine, not his moods, not his opinions of me. My mind had finally begun untangling itself from him, thread by thread. And that's when the deeper decision formed. I will build a life he cannot enter, influence, or interrupt. Not out of revenge, but out of respect for the woman I was becoming. I began documenting my journey. Not on paper, but in small private rituals. A new morning routine, a playlist that made me feel alive, a walk in a neighborhood he never liked. Conversations with people he tried to distance me from. Every small act was a quiet declaration. I choose me. He didn't notice at first. Men like him rarely do. They believe the woman will orbit them forever, until one day they look up and realize the sky is empty. The last confirmation of my decision came in a moment I didn't expect. I saw him at the supermarket. He hadn't noticed me yet. He stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes tired, the arrogance gone, the spark dimmed. He looked older than I felt, and for the first time I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, no ache, just distance. He saw me then. His eyes widened. He smiled. The same smile he once used to pull me back into his world, but I walked past him, calm, steady, unbothered, not out of pride, out of clarity. He was a chapter, not the story, and I had already begun writing the next page in silence. His biggest mistake wasn't leaving me. His biggest mistake was assuming I would stay exactly where he left me. Men like him always believe the same lie, that a woman they underestimated will forever remain small, frozen in the version of herself they created. He thought I would crumble. He thought I would wait. He thought I would chase the closure he never intended to give. Instead, I grew, quietly, steadily, powerfully. And while I rebuilt myself from the inside out, he made the one mistake he thought he was too smart to make. He stopped paying attention. At first, he was too busy enjoying the thrill of his new, younger life. New restaurants, new plans, new selfies with angles that tried too hard. He walked around with that inflated confidence men get when they think they've traded up. But fantasy always has an expiration date, and his came faster than he expected. It started with little things, small signs of boredom in the woman he'd chosen, tiny cracks in the perfect image he built in his head. She wasn't as impressed by him as he thought she would be. She didn't laugh at his jokes the way I used to. She didn't take care of everything for him. She had her own life, something he wasn't used to respecting. And suddenly, the relationship he bragged about became work, real work, the kind he had always expected me to do for him. Meanwhile, I was changing in ways he never saw coming. I started dressing differently, eating differently, walking differently. My posture changed, my energy changed, my presence changed. I became someone he couldn't predict and someone he definitely couldn't control. The first time he noticed was by accident. A mutual friend posted a picture, a group dinner, nothing special. But I was in the background, laughing, head thrown back, eyes bright, a woman who had shed years of emotional weight. He zoomed in. I know he did. Men like him always zoom in. And for the first time, he felt something he didn't expect, regret. He didn't reach out yet. Pride held him back, but he started watching, checking my social media late at night, asking subtle questions to people who knew me, trying to piece together a puzzle of a woman who no longer fit inside the memory he kept. His second mistake? Thinking he had time, he assumed my healing would be slow. He assumed I'd stay wounded long enough for him to come back when he got bored or lonely. But I wasn't healing at his pace. I was healing at mine. One afternoon, he passed by my street, not intentionally, or at least that's what he told himself. He stopped the car when he saw me walking back home. I was carrying groceries, hair up, no makeup, but with the quiet confidence of someone rebuilding her life from the inside. I looked different, lighter, stronger, untouchable. He froze, because for the first time he saw the thing he never expected to see, a woman who no longer needed him. He rolled down the window and called my name. The sound of his voice used to make my stomach twist. Now it barely grazed my skin. Thais, hey, you look good. Good. A simple word. But the fear beneath it was unmistakable. He wanted a reaction, a spark, a hint that he still lived somewhere inside me. He got nothing. I smiled politely, the way you smile at a stranger being kind, not at a man who once held your heart. And that's when it hit him. That was the moment. His real mistake, the one men like him never see until it's too late. He didn't lose me when he left. He lost me when I realized I was better without him. He thought he was upgrading. He thought he was walking toward a better life. But all he did was walk out of the life of a woman who was just about to discover her power. While he was busy chasing youth, I was becoming someone he could never keep up with, someone he would never reach again. The turning point didn't come with fireworks. It didn't come with a confrontation or a dramatic speech or some explosive revelation that shattered the world in a single moment. The turning point was quiet, the kind of quiet that changes everything without making a sound. It happened on a Thursday morning. I remember because the sunlight was softer than usual, spilling across my kitchen table in a warm, golden shade. I was drinking coffee, my hair still damp from the shower, wearing an old t-shirt that never once made me feel inadequate. There was nothing special about the moment, and maybe that was exactly what made it powerful. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about him. Not about what he was doing or who he was with or how he was living. My mind was mine again. I felt present in my own life, fully, calmly, quietly present. And then, without warning, a thought rose inside me with absolute clarity. I don't want my old life back. Not even a piece of it. Not even the good memories. Because the woman I was back then didn't know her worth. That realization broke something open in me, a freedom I hadn't known I was missing. I pushed my coffee aside, took a deep breath, and felt an unfamiliar but beautiful sensation. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on someone else behaving well. Not the temporary kind that comes after a fight. Not the conditional kind that requires shrinking yourself. This was peace born from alignment, from choosing myself, from trusting myself, from returning to myself. Later that afternoon, his message arrived. 3 words, "Can we talk?" Once upon a time, those words would have sent my heart racing, my stomach twisting, my mind spiraling into fantasies of apology and reconciliation. But now, I looked at the screen and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no longing, no fear, just neutrality. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left inside me that required a response. A few hours later, he tried again. "I think we ended things too fast. I've been thinking a lot." Of course he had. Regret always arrives when a woman stops waiting. Still, I didn't reply. I closed my phone, put it face down on the table, and returned to my evening, my meal, my book, my quiet moments of self-reconstruction. But the universe has its own timing. The real turning point came the next day, when I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. My old Pilates instructor. She looked at me surprised and said something I wasn't prepared to hear. "Thais, you look radiant." Radiant. Not younger, not thinner, not different. Radiant. A word that belonged to the woman I used to admire, not the woman I had been for so long. I smiled, genuinely, and for the first time, I felt the truth of it. Radiance wasn't about beauty. It wasn't about age. It wasn't about impressing anyone. Radiance was the natural glow that appears when a woman stops dimming herself. That night, I cooked dinner while music played softly in the background. I danced a little. I laughed at myself. I lit a candle just because I wanted the scent. And at some point, without planning to, I whispered out loud, "I'm proud of you." Not for surviving, not for healing, not for rising, but for finally seeing myself. That was the turning point. The moment I knew, deep in my bones, that I wasn't rebuilding my life because he left. I was rebuilding it because I had returned to it. The next morning, when he called again, I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to show strength, but because I didn't need to prove anything. His voice, his validation, his opinion, none of it mattered anymore. The turning point wasn't about him at all. It was about me reclaiming everything he once convinced me to abandon. My time, my mind, my dreams, my presence, my joy. I wasn't healing to win. I wasn't healing to impress. I was healing to live. And that was something he could never compete with. The moment of truth didn't arrive the way I once imagined. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting in the rain, no emotional collapse, no begging on his knees. Justice, real justice, comes quietly, the way dawn replaces night without asking for permission. It happened 2 months after the turning point. I'd been invited to a charity event by a colleague, a simple gathering, nothing extravagant, but it was the first time in a long time that I felt excited to get dressed. I chose a soft champagne blouse, black tailored pants, hair loosely curled over my shoulders, minimal makeup, just enough to highlight what had always been there, even in the years he refused to see it. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I simply felt good in my own skin, a feeling I hadn't known in years. As I walked into the venue, people turned, not in shock, not in admiration, in recognition. They saw a woman who carried herself with purpose, a woman who glowed from the inside out, a woman who looked like she belonged to her own future. And then I saw him. He was standing near the entrance, holding a drink he hadn't touched, shoulders slightly slumped, eyes scanning the room with a nervousness I had never seen in him before. When he spotted me, his entire body froze, his mouth parted, his eyebrows lifted, his chest rose with a startled breath. It wasn't attraction, it wasn't love, it was realization. The realization that the woman standing before him, confident, graceful, untouchable, was not the same woman he had walked away from. He approached slowly, as if afraid I would disappear if he moved too fast. "Thais," his voice cracked slightly, "you look incredible." I smiled politely, the same smile you offer someone who used to be important but no longer holds any part of your world. "Thank you." He swallowed hard. "I've been meaning to talk to you. I think I made a mistake." There it was, The confession men like him always keep for the moment they realize the woman they underestimated has risen beyond their reach. I tilted my head, calm, grounded, fully present. What mistake are we talking about? He exhaled sharply. You know, us, everything. I didn't see what I had. I didn't realize. He hesitated, his throat tightening. I didn't realize how much I'd lose. For a moment, I simply studied him. The lines on his forehead were deeper. The confidence in his posture was gone. His eyes, once sharp with arrogance, now held a nervous vulnerability. He looked older, not because of time, but because of regret. I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no desire for closure. Just clarity. You didn't lose me, I said softly. You let go of a version of me you never bothered to understand. He blinked, stunned by the calmness in my tone. I can change, he whispered. We can fix this. I know we can. I shook my head gently. I don't want the life we had, and I don't want the woman I was with you. He stepped closer, desperate. I miss you. I miss us. I held his gaze, steady, unwavering. There is no us to miss. There is who you were and who I am now. And those two people no longer live in the same world. He inhaled sharply, eyes glistening with an emotion he once believed he was too superior to feel. What happened to you? He asked, almost broken. I smiled, not cruelly, but truthfully. I started living. He lowered his head, defeated. The weight of the moment crushed his last illusion of control, and that was the justice. Not revenge, not punishment, not humiliation, just truth. The truth that the woman he dismissed as too old had become a woman he could never keep up with. The truth that he wasn't walking back into my life. He was arriving at the door of a life he was never meant to enter. He whispered one last time, I'm sorry, Thais. I nodded politely. I hope you find what you're looking for. But as I walked away, I knew he wouldn't, because what he lost was irreplaceable. Not me, but the version of me who once believed he was the best she could have. That woman was gone, and the woman who replaced her was never going back. Today, when I look at my life, I don't see what I lost. I see what I gained. My home feels different now, not because the furniture changed, but because I did. There is music in my mornings again, soft, gentle melodies that fill the kitchen as sunlight warms the tiles beneath my feet. I make coffee the way I like it, sitting by the window with my notebook, writing thoughts I once silenced to protect a man who never cared to listen. My evenings are peaceful. Sometimes I read, sometimes I take long baths, sometimes I call friends I had been forced to distance myself from, and sometimes I sit quietly, simply grateful to have my own company back. Life didn't become perfect, it became mine. I've started new routines, longer morning walks, Pilates classes, small weekend trips, healthy meals, quiet rituals that remind me I am alive, present, and whole. And slowly, without forcing it, new opportunities began to appear. A new project at work, new friendships, a dance class I had always wanted to try, a book club at the cafe near my house, a version of myself that felt nothing like the woman I used to be. Sometimes people tell me I look different. I don't. I simply carry myself differently. I stand taller. I breathe deeper. I speak with a voice that no longer apologizes for taking up space. And the most surprising part, I don't feel 50. I feel free. 50 stopped sounding like an ending and started sounding like a beginning. A beginning I almost missed because I believed the lie that my story had an expiration date. Now I know better. I'm not too old to start over. I was simply too tired of carrying a life that wasn't meant for me. There are still days when my chest tightens with the memory of everything I endured. The humiliation, the dismissal, the years I dimmed myself so he could shine. But I no longer break when I remember. I simply acknowledge the past and let it stay behind me. Healing isn't forgetting. Healing is remembering without losing yourself again. As for him, he still tries from time to slip back into my world. A message on a lonely evening, a comment on a picture someone else posted, a half-hearted attempt to check in, but I don't answer, not out of pride, not out of anger, but because that chapter is closed. He lives in the consequences of his choices. I live in the freedom of mine. I don't hate him, I don't resent him, I don't wish him harm. I simply wish him distance, because the version of me he tried to shrink no longer exists. And the woman I've become will never again make herself small to fit into someone else's comfort. If he were to see me now, the calm in my eyes, the steadiness in my voice, the softness of my smile, he would realize something painful and beautiful. He didn't just lose a partner, he lost a future that only a woman like me could have offered. And I gained myself, a self I didn't even know I could become, a self I'm proud to wake up as every morning, a self who walks with dignity, breathes with peace, and lives with a quiet joy that no one can take away. Starting over at 50 wasn't a setback, it was liberation, and I'm no longer running behind anyone. Now I walk at my own pace, steady, grounded, and far, far ahead of the man who once believed I was too old to begin again. He can't keep up with me, not anymore, not ever. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Stories We Tell, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep creating stories about strength, self-respect, and new beginnings, because stories that restore dignity deserve to be told and remembered. Thank you for being here.